Recent research by the UCL's Institute for Education has found that almost half of English schools have no Black or minority ethnic teachers. And even where there is diversity among staff, senior leadership teams are invariably white. Meanwhile, university student Joshua Chima, I hope I'm saying that right, recently tweeted, "Imagine achieving 3 A stars and 1 A at A level, studying law at Oxford, holding a scholarship worth £45,000 and co-founding a social enterprise at 18, just to be told you can't tutor because Black tutors are bad for business." Laughing my ass off, and we move on. What effect do you think the lack of representation in schools is having on highly melanated children? And is there any point in gaining a formal education if people still won't hire you because of the colour of your skin?
See, this is a tough one. I first want to say whoever said that to him is just a dum-dum. I just want to make that clear, for lack of better words. But what effect I think it has, it's a little bit tough because, I know some kids, but I'm not really in the streets with the kids, so I can't say 100% what's directly affecting them. But when I'm speaking to the kids that I know, it's more about visibility, if that makes any sense. Just seeing people that look like them in places that are kind of more like everyday places. I don't know how to make that make sense, because sometimes they only may see people that look like them, maybe in a job where people will want, I'm trying to explain, like they might see them as like celebrities, but seeing them in your everyday, like a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor, is just having that visibility to see themselves as something more than just an entertainer. Because I think sometimes as minorities, we're almost sold the dream that the only way we can get out is if we become an entertainer, etc., etc. So I think it's important to have representation in those places just for visibility and also just for understanding. Like for me, just speaking on my own personal life, when I was in school, we only had one Black teacher, but he came when I was like year 10. So I spent most of my secondary school life with white teachers. And I found there was more understanding, for example, because, I grew up with Jamaican parents, and so they had really thick accents. So my pronunciations of words were sometimes like really off. So I may say something and it just was the complete wrong pronunciation. And when I tried to explain that to a teacher, they maybe weren't as either, like they made a joke about it, which could sometimes like make you feel a little bit odd, and it made me feel weird. And even things like, what's it called? Meeting the parents, the parent-teacher thing, parents' evening, there you go. They couldn't understand my dad, some of them, and it was just the cultural thing because he had a thick accent. But with the Black teacher, unfortunately, he was Jamaican, so him and my dad got on like a house on fire. They could really have a conversation. My dad could understand where he was coming from, and that made my dad feel more involved in my schooling and be able to say a certain saying, etc., etc. So I think it's visibility, it's understanding. Do I think people should turn away from formal education? I would say no. Personally, I don't feel like you should let anybody stop you from going after things that you want. Obviously, it's much easier said than done if you are experiencing racism and, you've got education because you thought you were going to get a certain job and then you tried to go about industry and then racism is what stops you. But I feel like if you really want something, you shouldn't let anybody stop it. So for me, I don't think you should let that stop you from getting a formal education.
Yeah, I think ethnic minority children miss a lot by not having teachers who represent them. I'll talk about Black kids specifically because, I was a Black kid. I was fortunate enough to go to a primary school that all the teachers were Black. There were no white teachers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm surprised.
And I thought that was the norm until I hear other people's story and they're like, I never had a Black teacher until secondary school, and even then. So for us, it was just normal. And I think there's that level of care, and that they genuinely cared about your attainment and what it is that you were going to get. And it meant that whenever I went to another school, no one could ever tell me that I wasn't the stuff, that I wasn't intelligent. Like by the time I went to a second primary school in year 5, I believed that I would be one of the best in the class, because I'm just like, well, like I was in my other school, and you know what? Like I was always told to do my best, and my best was always good enough. So I think I had that level of care, that level of confidence within myself. And something that I would say it dramatically affects Black kids is the school to prison timeline. So like a lot of ethnic minorities are in prison and we're overrepresented, and they're saying this can be seen from schooling. They're saying children who are temporarily excluded are like 40-something% more likely to end up in prison. Kids who are permanently excluded are 60% plus more likely to end up in the prison system. And it's having a detrimental effect when Black Caribbean boys, which is statistically true, that they do worse at GCSEs than like any other group. And then when you have those low grades or you don't finish or you're excluded, it sets you on a path to completely not have access to the opportunities in life that you should. So I think it's having a detrimental effect, and not just on Black students, but just institutions in general, because we know that wherever there is diversity of opinions, of people, companies do better. So everybody is missing out, but especially the kids.
I kind of feel that we're in a unique time because of the internet. I kind of feel that like in my parents' era, like having a formal education made a bigger difference. I kind of think that we'll reach a point in time where like, because of the opportunities online and being able to reach anybody, even during this pandemic, work remotely, it's so unique that a formal education perhaps doesn't matter as much. But that depends on what you want to do. So if you want to be like a doctor, a dentist, or anything like that, then yeah, by all means, like go get your formal education. But I kind of feel that so many jobs, like even like Elon Musk with like Tesla, he perhaps doesn't look at formal qualifications as much, and I think that there's a trend with more companies and businesses being open to not having that as a requirement. And then also I think of it as well, I think of we have to also be mindful of like who's doing the hiring, and I think that if we're trying to be hired by institutions where there's a lack of representation or a lack of opportunities for minorities, this might be wrong or right to say, are we therefore banging our heads against the wall trying to get into these institutions? And should we not, like, I don't want to say set up our own institutions for ourselves, but set up institutions that have an open table for everybody to get into, and perhaps we'll consider people on other merits outside of formal education.
I want to say though, like when we talk about formal education, how far are we talking about in terms of education? Are we talking past secondary school?
So for me, okay, cool. So I think when I was just speaking, I was referring more to like degrees and what have you. But even if you look at like secondary school and like primary school or what have you, like for me, I don't see why like a lot of education that perhaps you may as a youngster without finding representation, why you can't necessarily find online. Even myself, like my closest peers and like internet influencers, if you like, that I look at online, most of them are Black or Black American, because of that we don't necessarily have that representation here in the UK. And I still learn generally, like literally like 95% of my learning is like through scouring the internet for content. And I just feel that we're moving into an era where if you don't have access to that, there's no reason why you can't acquire that knowledge from people if you look for it online.
Okay, I hear you. I get that in a degree sense, but honestly, I maybe not for primary school. That's just my personal preference. Because kids are a nightmare to get them to sit down by the computer. No offense to people that have children, but it's tough. Like just seeing the few people that I have trying to homeschool their kids online, it's just been a nightmare. But that's only because I think their kids have been obviously socialized in a school and then have to go from it. But I guess if you were a home learner, you wouldn't know the sorry to abbreviate, you wouldn't know the difference. But go. Sorry.
No, go on.
Well, I was going to say that in the last few years, I've actually been able to be privy to a lot of Black educators, and I actually had never really met a group. And there's a lot of like Black Teacher Network, and they've got like a Black Teacher Twitter, they call it, and things like that. And it's just like a network of black teachers who are supporting each other. And I think it's because obviously they are like one of one in their schools, right? And the children of color, from what I've seen, because I follow a few of them on Twitter, and obviously I live with a black teacher, what I get from them is that the kids are so happy to see somebody of color, and so the kids respond really well and typically perform better in their classes versus their white counterparts. I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm not trying to call the kids racist, but whatever it is, right? The kids just perform better. And what I found is that they usually find their experience quite lonely and just isolating, and that's why they've formed this kind of network. And I think what you were talking about, Lisimba, in regards to you can find education elsewhere, it could be things like that black teacher network. If they decided to pull their education resources together and had like a online teaching network, then people could go and get their education there. Sorry, that's a thought I had.
No, please continue if you still had more.
No, that was that. That was the thought I had.
So, okay, cool. So let me ask you a question then. So with you being a twin, let's say you had, what's it? Is it quintuplets is 4?
No, that's
Quins
quads
5.
are 4.
Quads are 4. What's quintuplets? 6?
Yeah.
5.
Okay, cool. Let's say you had quads. Let's say you had quads, right? And they go to a school, and in terms of like having, let's say, you know, black teachers, what have you, there's just none there. Like in that situation, and let's say for argument's sake they're like 9 years old, what would you do?
Do you know what? I'm not gonna lie to you. I think it depends. It's tough. It depends, because for me, if there was enough balance in the children, then I don't know if I would and the school I felt was good, I don't know if I would take them from the school. And I know that sounds crazy, because for me, I didn't have lots of black teachers in my life. I only had one black teacher in my life. And I just never saw that as a thing to be concerned, because, and I know, obviously this sounds crazy, but you know, we are in England, and as people of colour, there's a lot of us here, we are the minority. So I don't expect to see a school full of black teachers, so I think kind of when I don't see one, I'm not particularly alarmed, because I just think, okay, that's a little bit normal. And maybe I've been conditioned to think that way. I don't know.
Do you think, though, you could be, or your children potentially could be missing out in terms of a cultural advantage by not having access to teachers from those kind of backgrounds?
Absolutely. Like, remember when I said, like, with my the black teacher, I had my IT teacher, him just being able to even speak to my dad and everybody understand what my dad was saying, and dad could understand what he was saying, kind of helped like bridge that gap. And also, obviously, I hang out with a lot of black teachers now. I understand that their students are getting a different kind of experience, almost like a bit of an elevated experience. So I know, why would I not want that for my children? I absolutely know. I know. But I don't know. I think I'd have to be reminded at the time. If I wouldn't be reminded, then I probably would forget. I hate to say that, but that's the truth.
And Sophie?
So for me, would I not put my children in a school where there were predominantly white teachers? No, that wouldn't be an issue for me. To be honest, for me, it's more so the caliber of the school. And then making sure that I'm supplementing what they're not getting in school at home. And I don't mean black teaching because I'm not a teacher, but that confidence in themselves, that belief in them. Like, I would probably have to be a lot more conscious, knowing that they're probably not going to kind of get that sort of thing from school. And I think maybe something that happened with Akala when he wasn't getting that in school, when things were much more racist when he was growing up. He talks about in his book, his parents put him into like a Pan-African school on Saturdays, where he was able to be around black teachers and to get that experience and to get that self-belief in himself that he wasn't getting elsewhere. Now, if I thought my child wasn't getting that, then that's what I'd probably do, because I don't want to make it seem like only a black teacher can give your child what they need, because it's not true. Like, my niece is extremely intelligent. She's about to sit her GCSEs, and she has predominantly white teachers, and they really believe in her. When my sister goes to parents' evening, they're just like, we want her to do so well, we really back her, they're giving her all the support that she needs. So I think they can get that from elsewhere. I think one of the issues that I have is that the school system isn't set for all children. So I think something that Lisimba was saying, like, oh, in this day and age, you don't need formal education. And apparently only 30% of children, this is what someone told me, so don't quote me on this one, but apparently someone said 30% of children learn through the current systems that we have in school. So examinations, the modules, the coursework, they're saying the majority don't, but we keep pushing it and then we reward the children who are academic. And I think there's a problem with the way that we teach in general. I don't think we should do away with formal education. I don't think we should stop getting formal education because it does open certain doors that you want to get through. So you have to play the game. But I think we need to really change the system so that creativity is rewarded in children and that's seen as a viable way to learn, a viable career. Because I think right now that's what a lot of kids are suffering from in schools.
Sorry, just listening to you, Sophie, sorry, not to jump in. I think I've changed my mind about what I'm saying about the black teachers. Listen, but the reason why, because it's not just about education. Something my sister's always telling me about, it's not just that black teachers could give you a better education. It's even things like behavior management, because she's always talking about like some of the kids that she has of color. Other teachers have come to her and, for example, have said, oh, this person's aggressive or they act this way. And it's not been true at all. But if you were to listen to that particular teacher, they may pursue a route of this child being aggressive. Like, for example, I had a friend named Crystal. She was very quiet, actually. But when she did speak, she had some bass in her voice. Our French teacher then said that she had an anger problem and then brought her to the pastoral leaders and made her take some sort of anger management course. We were 14. The girl's never had an anger problem in her life. But some teachers who are not experienced dealing with minorities or maybe have a prejudice, their behaviour management of children of colour is very suspect. So that's why maybe I would want black teachers now. Sorry, I full looped. Go. Sorry.
That's a good point. It's a really good point.
Just to interestingly add to that, I don't know if, maybe it's not a positive thing. Maybe it is good or it's bad. I can't really decide. But when I hear that, it also makes me think because of we are here in England where we're a minority, it might not be what the child wants to go through, but that's potentially good training for what you can expect to go through in, let's say, the workplace. Because unfortunately we do face those challenges when we're in the minority, and learning how to deal with them is unfortunately something that we have to go through.